Hi, my name is Eugene Kim. I'm an attorney in the New York, New Jersey area. Today my presentation will look at President Park Geun-Hye and the human rights violations committed against her. 안녕하십니까. 뉴욕, 뉴저지 지역의 김유진 변호사입니다. 죄송하지만 발표는 영어로 하겠습니다. 미국에서 태어나서 영어가 더 편합니다. 이해해 주십시오. My presentation will be divided into three sections. First, I'll talk about the definition of human rights. Second, I'll take a look at some of the specific violations committed against Park Geun-Hye. And finally, we'll take a look at what can be done about it. So, what are human rights? One very simple definition is human rights are fundamental rights belonging to all persons by the fact of their being human. Human rights are referenced in many countries' governing documents. For example, the U.S. Declaration of Independence. There's a very famous sentence. The second sentence of the Declaration of Independence says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." South Korea. South Korea's constitution also makes reference to human rights. Article 10 says this: "All citizens shall be assured of human worth and dignity, and have the right to pursue happiness. It shall be the duty of the state to confirm and guarantee the fundamental and inviolable human rights of individuals." In 1948, after World War I and World War II, the United Nations adopted something called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is a very comprehensive document on the topic of human rights. It's a very important document in international law. Many parts of it, several parts of it, apply to President Park's situation. We don't have time to get into all of them, but I will mention a few of the provisions that I believe are relevant. Article 5 prohibits inhumane or degrading treatment or punishment. Article 9 prohibits arbitrary arrest or detention. Article 10 guarantees the right to a fair and public hearing by an independent and impartial court. Article 11 guarantees the right to presumed innocence until being proven guilty. Article 12 prohibits attacks upon a person's reputation. So let's take a look at the human rights violations against Park Geun-Hye. I apologize, I don't have a better way to show you these pictures at the moment, but if you can see here in this slide, there are a couple pictures. One shows a sculpture of President Park bound and tied with rope next to what looks like a jail cell. The other picture shows signs that say, in Korean, "Detain Park Geun-Hye" and "Withdraw Thad." These were used by the so-called candlelight protesters. This next slide shows a group of protesters, and in the background it's difficult to see here, but there is a giant ball which on the surface has President Park's face on it. The ball was used to kicked around by protesters. Here in this next slide, there are inflated air dancers. The blue figure has a sign that says release Lee Seok-gi. The red figure has a sign that says detain Park Geun-Hye. Lee Seok-gi, as you all probably know, is a left-wing, extreme left-wing Korean politician who was convicted and sentenced a few years ago for plotting a pro-North Korean rebellion to overthrow South Korea's government. In this next slide, we see a picture of a guillotine and what appears to be a life-size replica of a guillotine. The message by these protesters is pretty obvious. Continuing with that disturbing theme, in this next slide, we see a sculpture of President Park's severed head with blood dripping, a banner underneath that says, "Traitor to the Korean people." On the other side of the slide is a picture depicting President Park as the evil monster Medusa from Greek mythology. I just want to pause here to consider one thing. In America, here in America, several weeks ago, a comedian by the name of Kathy Griffin made headlines by posting a picture of herself holding a, obviously it wasn't real, but holding a head, the severed head of President Donald Trump with blood all over it. It was really pretty gruesome, very shocking. So when this came out, the reaction almost universally was that of condemnation, even from the left-leaning mainstream media. I mention this because I'm curious what the reaction was in South Korea when images such as the severed head of Park Geun-Hye came out. Here in this slide, we see booths set up for the Sewol ferry incident. There's a sign that says, "Without Park Geun-Hye's resignation, there is no truth." Park Geun-Hye was made to be a scapegoat here. In this next slide, this made headlines in Korea. This is basically a modification that was done to a famous painting. You see President Park's face imposed on the woman who is nude and sleeping. In the background you can see they put the Sewol ferry sinking into the ocean, and they also put Choi she's the woman attending to President Park here. This next slide, another obscene picture, and another sculpture. I think we saw that before, of President Park bound and tied. More recently here, we have a picture of President Park surrounded by the police. There have been reports that President Park has been questioned excessively, up to 14 hours per day, sometimes up to 4 days per week. There are reports also that she is suffering some serious health issues, kidney, stomach, knees, back, and that not enough is being done to address these issues. This next picture is President Park being taken to the hospital. You can't see President Park because she's covered by what looks to be a blanket. This was not too long ago, right in the middle of summer, so it's not really clear why President Park is being taken to the hospital. You can't see President Park because she's covered by what looks to be a blanket. This was not too long ago, right in the middle of summer, so it's not really clear why President Park is being taken to the hospital. you would cover someone with a blanket in the middle of summer when it's really hot like that. So what can we do? Probably the most immediate, easiest thing we can do is to participate in petitions and campaigns to raise awareness, to bring attention to this issue. Several petitions and campaigns have been started. They're ongoing. There are a couple of petitions circulating on the website change.org. If you want to sign those, if you haven't already, you can do that. One is titled Human Rights Petition for Park Geun-Hye and Others. So if you go to the website change.org and just put in a search for Human Rights Petition for Park Geun-Hye and Others, you should be able to see this, and you can sign it. There's another one titled Bring President Geun-Hye Park to America for Medical Treatment. Again, you can run a search for that and sign it. The more signatures, the better. The more signatures, the more likely it is that relevant decision makers will pay attention and do something about it. We can also try to get various nonprofit organizations, various NGOs that have influence in the arena of international law involved. One prominent example of such an organization is Amnesty International. I have heard reports that Amnesty International has been contacted regarding the human rights violations against Park Geun-Hye. I'm not sure if anything will come of it. Amnesty International in the past has been critical of President Park's administration. There is also the option of the international courts. One such court is the International Criminal Court, or the ICC. There are 4 types of crimes that the ICC prosecutes: genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and crimes of aggression. The way that the ICC defines these crimes generally requires that there be physical violence on a large scale against the population. North Korea's Kim Jong-un comes to mind as a prime example, a perfect example actually of someone who could be prosecuted by the ICC. In South Korea's case, I think it's clear that Moon Jae-in is indeed a war criminal himself. One can make an argument that his fraudulent and illegal and unconstitutional election was and continues to be a means to aid the enemy of the state, North Korea. South Korea is technically still at war with North Korea, so whatever he does to help North Korea is basically an act of treason against South Korea, against his own people, against the people of South Korea. By definition, is that not a war crime? Another international court is the International Court of Justice, the ICJ. This is a part of the UN. Generally, only member states, UN member states, can bring a case before the ICJ. It's not open to private individuals such as you or myself. There are certain exceptions made for non-member states, but the ICJ is basically a court for hearing disputes between different countries. For example, a border dispute. So how might the ICJ be relevant to President Park? First, let's consider the possibility that the USA could bring a case against South Korea. What if President Trump determined that the Moon regime is illegitimate, that it's a fake government? What if President Trump realized that Korea's sovereignty was stolen by some guy pretending to be the president? In such a case, could the US then bring a case against South Korea in the ICJ, perhaps based on a claim involving US national security or some obligation arising out of the US ROK alliance? It's possible. Secondly, let's consider the scenario of two South Korean governments, one represented by President Park, the other represented by the fraudulent Moon regime. In such a scenario, the Park government would probably be what's called a government in exile or a provisional government. There are actually a lot of examples of this throughout history. One of the most famous examples was during World War II. It was the provisional government of the French Republic under Charles de Gaulle. Basically, France was invaded by Germany. There was chaos, turmoil. A group of people led by Charles de Gaulle formed this temporary government for the free French people. So we could have a similar thing here. It's not just some wild theory, but people have already raised that possibility, have begun exploring it. So it may actually be much closer to a reality than just a theory. If that is the case, then the government represented by the Park regime could potentially bring a case in the ICJ against the fraudulent Moon regime. And basically, the ICJ could determine the issue of who is the rightful government of the Republic of Korea, who has the rightful authority to lead the country. In addition to international courts, could a case on behalf of President Park be brought in national courts, such as the U.S. courts? The U.S. has a law called the Alien Tort Statute. On its face, the Alien Tort Statute allows foreigners to sue in U.S. federal courts for violations of international law. However, there was a recent Supreme Court case that pretty significantly narrowed the scope of that law, so it's not clear whether the Alien Tort Statute would help President Park in this situation. There's also the possibility if President Park could gain asylum into the U.S., perhaps on that basis she could bring claims in U.S. courts against Moon or his regime. What about the Korean courts? Putting aside the pretty severe bias of Korean judges, the Korean courts would probably be the most natural forum for President Park and her claims. What are some potential causes of action, claims that she would have against Moon, against the current regime? There's false imprisonment, basically that she's being detained without any justification. She may have a cause of action for malicious prosecution. Basically, that the case, the criminal case against her is not based on any reasonable grounds, but it is driven by basically a hatred towards her. She may have a cause of action for defamation, that statements about her have been made that are false and untrue, and that are designed to tarnish her reputation. She may have a cause of action for lack of due process. I'm not admitted as an attorney licensed in the Korean courts, and I'm not experienced with Korean law, but in the U.S. There's a concept called due process, and I believe there's probably a similar concept in Korea, basically guaranteeing that the process, the legal process, is going to be fair. There's going to be certain protections for the defendant, for President Park. She may have a claim that those protections, those procedures were basically ignored. She may have a cause of action for cruel and unusual punishment. That's something that in the U.S. Constitution says you have a right not to be punished in a cruel or unusual manner. I don't know if South Korea has something similar, but perhaps she would have a claim on that type of basis. President Park has a cause of action based on fraud, that her impeachment, the criminal trial against her currently, that her being removed from office, that all of it was fraudulent. It's all based on lies and untruths. So these are some of the potential causes of action that she may have in South Korean courts, and perhaps in American courts as well. All options should be considered. The goal is to provide a remedy for the wrong suffered by President Park, and by extension the people of South Korea, and to make the truth known. In order to accomplish these goals, we, the people, must make our voices heard. Let's continue to do that until the whole world knows the truth.